Zhou Quan looked odd, seemingly conflicted and hesitant. He nudged Chu Feng, whispering, "Do you think that 32-year-old man who grew a pair of silver wings can actually fly in the sky?" "Probably," Chu Feng nodded, then found it somewhat amusing, saying, "It's not like you're the one growing wings, why are you so nervous? I also have a bright red fruit, don't I?" Zhou Quan carefully opened his backpack. The plant that he had dug up earlier was still there, wrapped in a transparent bag, which also kept the aroma from spreading. On the plant, there was a bright red fruit about the size of a fist. It was as crystal clear as red agate. As soon as he opened the bag, a strong aroma overflowed. "Do you think if I eat it, will I also grow something?" Zhou Quan was doubtful and extremely conflicted. This time, Chu Feng didn't laugh. Instead, he looked serious. It was okay if he didn't know before, but now it seems that the fruit produced by these mutated plants is extraordinary. "You wait first. Let's see if there is more news about the guy who grew silver wings," said Chu Feng. "What a wonderful smell, what kind of fruit did you guys get?" The middle-aged man driving the car looked very surprised. The car sped away from the small town, heading towards the horizon. "It's a wild fruit. We don't know what kind it is, so we don't dare to eat it," Zhou Quan said. He really didn't dare to eat it recklessly. What if he doesn't grow wings but a horn or a tail instead? Then he would have nowhere to cry. "If you're not sure, don't eat it recklessly. It would be troublesome if you get poisoned," the middle-aged man kindly reminded them. Then he sighed, worried about his family. He only worked in the small town behind them. His family wasn't there but in another small town hundreds of miles away. He didn't know what was happening at home. Overnight, anomalies appeared in many places, especially after experiencing it firsthand. He was quite scared. He hoped to get home as soon as possible, so he drove like the wind. There was no denying that the middle-aged man was an excellent driver. The thrilling overtaking and the constant bumping and shaking almost made Zhou Quan vomit. "I surrender, uncle, I give up." Zhou Quan initially found it exciting, but later he was completely exhausted, almost to the point of foaming at the mouth. Outside the car window, the trees on both sides of the road were retreating at high speed. Even Chu Feng felt a bit dizzy. He was really worried that such reckless driving would cause an accident. Looking back, the giant vine was still vividly visible, still within its range. It was suspended in midair, its main body far from the ground, like a green giant city as high as the sky or undulating mountains, boundlessly majestic. How enormous must it be? But thinking about it, it made sense. How else could it pull down a man-made satellite? The middle-aged man drove hundreds of miles in one breath. When he entered another small town, he slowed down because there were more vehicles. There's a follow-up report. "Look, that man with silver wings can truly fly in midair, and his whole body is enveloped in silver light. It's astonishing, but it looks quite divine." Zhou Quan pointed it out to Chu Feng. The man's photo on the communicator was very clear. This was a young man, very handsome. When his body emitted silver light, his pupils also shone brightly, silver rays radiating from them. Even his hair became shiny. Chu Feng was moved. The world was undergoing drastic changes, and some things were becoming increasingly incomprehensible. Some supernatural phenomena could not be explained by the original laws of the world. Why don't they report more and let the man himself talk about his experiences? Zhou Quan complained, very dissatisfied. He continued to search and finally found a new report. This man was invited by the Divine Biological Group. This is a big company. They will help him thoroughly check all vital signs, Zhou Quan said. Upon hearing this, Chu Feng frowned slightly. Divine Biological belonged to the Lin family, mainly dealing with biological medicine. He didn't know about this before. After breaking up with Lin Nuai, he gradually learned about it. The name Divine Biological. Chu Feng pondered. He used to think that the head of the Lin family was ambitious, so he chose such a name. Now it seemed, perhaps it was indicative. Because through Lin Nuai's performance, he knew that her clan had some understanding of the truth and had long sensed that the world would change. Ever since he learned about the Lin family's background, he understood why when he wanted to see Lin Nuai off at graduation, her family was so indifferent, causing him to only wave from a distance and then leave. "What's wrong, buddy? What are you thinking about?" Zhou Quan saw him in a daze and asked. "I was thinking about my ex-girlfriend," Chu Feng casually said. "Did you break up with her first? Are you regretting it now?" Zhou Quan laughed. "No, she broke up with me," Chu Feng admitted. There was nothing wrong with saying this, and he didn't feel it was shameful. It should have been brought up and moved on from. "You've moved on so quickly." Zhou Quan was surprised, then wailed. His first love made him heartbroken for 2 years, and he still hadn't let go. This time, he went to the Tibetan region for a trip, which was a revisit to the old place and also a final attempt to forget. Chu Feng said, "Our relationship was always very calm. We didn't spend much time together. It started and ended in peace." "What happened?" Zhou Quan asked curiously. Chu Feng shook his head. Although he had moved on, he didn't want to talk about it more. Finally, after driving hundreds of miles, the middle-aged man was almost home. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan could no longer hitch a ride and had to get off early. We can't see that giant vine anymore. Zhou Quan looked back. The sky was blue, not obscured, and he breathed a sigh of relief. In that area, he always felt an inexplicable sense of oppression. Half an hour later, they entered the adjacent big city and came to the long-distance bus station. There were buses going to the Taihang Mountains in the north. After the bus set off smoothly, both of them felt relieved. They were worried that the bus wouldn't depart given the current situation. It seems like nothing happened in this region. Only the road we experienced was strange. All because of that giant vine. Zhou Quan grumbled. The final stop of this long-distance bus was a huge city in the north, known as the ancient capital of 6 dynasties. On the way, it would pass the foot of the Taihang Mountains. In fact, the homes of Chu Feng and Zhou Quan were also at the northernmost end of Taihang Mountain, adjacent to the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties. If nothing goes wrong, we should be able to reach the foot of Taihang Mountain before sunset, Chu Feng said. It was 800 miles away from the northern giant city. Even if there was a traffic jam, according to the speed of the long-distance bus, they should be able to reach it before sunset. Now that anomalies were happening everywhere, the most discussed topic on the bus was these incidents. I heard that missiles have been used to try to blast some things down from space. Yeah, I heard that too, but I haven't seen any reports. I don't know if it's true or false. There were various discussions on the bus. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan looked at each other. They thought of the suspended plants similar to the giant vine. It was indeed necessary to remove them immediately. Time passed, and the bus moved steadily forward. Zhou Quan let out a sigh. He searched through his communicator, but to his disappointment, he could only find one last image. The young man with silver wings was taken away by the divine beings. That was the last photo. After that, there were no more follow-up reports about him. Did they really take him away for examination? It looked more like they were welcoming a new noble. Zhou Quan grumbled discontentedly. The procession was led by top-class luxury cars, and the Lin family's high-ranking members were personally present. Chu Feng glanced at the photo without uttering a word. Now, various reports were surfacing, causing unease among the people. Unusual incidents were being reported continuously. Chu Feng skimmed through the news and decided not to pay any more attention. He ate some food and drank some water in the car before closing his eyes to rest. Gradually, he fell asleep. Brother, wake up, we have a problem, Zhou Quan called out to him. Chu Feng was awakened and opened his eyes to find it was already late afternoon, with the sun nearing the horizon. What's wrong? He asked. The driver is freaking out. He says we've already driven over 1,000 miles, but we're still not there. According to the road signs, we still have hundreds of miles to go, Zhou Quan reported. Chu Feng was completely awake. Was this similar to the area covered by the vines? Was the earth expanding, as if it were being stretched out? Some people thought the driver had taken a wrong turn, but he swore that he had been driving this road for 5 or 6 years and could not have made a mistake. The car continued to move, following the direction indicated by the universally recognized road signs. I'm not driving any further. This is definitely related to those abnormal incidents reported in the news. I want to live, not die. The driver, known for his temper, completely lost his patience when he heard someone complaining that he might have taken the wrong route earlier. Ha! Someone looked up towards the left front. A mountain stood there, towering and majestic, reaching into the clouds. It had abruptly appeared right next to the road, nearly blocking it. This mountain wasn't here just a moment ago. What's going on? Driver, please hurry up and get us out of here. Screams filled the car. Without a word, the driver floored the accelerator, racing away in fear as he had witnessed the mountain mysteriously materialize. I shouldn't have traveled far from home. He regretted his decision, his face pale as he sped up. Inside the car, many people were in a state of panic. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan, having experienced such events before, managed to stay calm. However, in the end, Zhou Quan couldn't help but pray in a whisper, "May the heavens bless us, let us return home safely." The car sped like a madman, rushing headlong, nearly causing several accidents. In fact, it was obvious that other vehicles were also speeding up. Clearly, the people in those cars had been frightened during their journey. Thank heavens, we're finally back. When the stars appeared, Zhou Quan let out a sigh of relief. He saw familiar scenery and the continuous Taihang Mountains in the distance. Chu Feng also gradually relaxed. They were only a few dozen miles from home. Even if they got out of the car now, they could walk back. However, after driving a few more miles, the bus came to a sudden stop. Many people bumped into the seats in front of them, cries of pain filling the air. What kind of driving is this? Someone shouted angrily. However, people soon fell silent under the starry sky and moonlight. A large lake appeared ahead, emitting wisps of mist that mingled with the moonlight, as if covered by a thin veil. The lake was vast, exuding a faint glow under the stars and moonlight, carrying an indescribable aura of spirit and beauty. It was indeed beautiful, crystal clear like a fairy lake, absorbing the essence of the sun and moon. What's going on? The road has ended, and a large lake suddenly appeared. Zhou Quan was astonished. He had grown up in this area not far from his home, and he had never seen this lake before. The road ended here. What are you waiting for? Get off the bus and go around. Chu Feng urged. The sudden appearance of the lake, in Chu Feng's view, was similar to the sudden emergence of a mountain earlier. The earth was expanding and undergoing dramatic changes. Landforms previously unknown to the world were emerging and becoming visible. People on the bus split into two groups. Some wanted to go around, while others wanted to wait until daylight. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan trekked for dozens of miles to bypass the lake. They walked until late into the night, finally spotting a small city in the distance. That was SP County, where Zhou Quan's home was located. Chu Feng's home was still more than 10 miles further. I'm finally home. Zhou Quan was overjoyed and completely relieved. What's that? Chu Feng looked towards the Taihang mountain range. Suddenly, there was a continuous rumbling sound, and several towering mountains unexpectedly emerged. They were so majestic, stretching for thousands, even tens of thousands of meters high, extending continuously. Hundreds, even thousands of them appeared all at once. Compared to them, the original mountains seemed too short. Moreover, there was a flow of brilliant colors there, incredibly sacred. In the dead of night, the Taihang mountain range was filled with constant rumbling sounds. Hundreds, even thousands of towering mountains sprung up from the ground out of nowhere, presenting an awe-inspiring spectacle. Some peaks stood over 1,000 feet tall, resembling heavenly swords piercing the sky. They were incredibly steep, perilous, and virtually unclimbable. Other mountains were grand and robust, their entire forms massive, reminiscent of ancient mythical bulls. They exuded an aura of wildness, lying horizontally, their heights reaching tens of thousands of meters. Silver waterfalls hung on some mountainsides, creating a misty and spiritual ambience under the moonlight, appearing like ribbons from afar. Is this the Taihang mountain range I know? Zhou Quan was utterly astounded, nearly biting through his lip, convinced that he was not dreaming. The changes were drastic, as if heaven and earth had turned upside down. These extraordinary sights were jaw-dropping and unbelievable. Chu Feng was stunned, too, somewhat out of his wits. Ahead, a multitude of gigantic mountains had appeared out of thin air, far surpassing the original Taihang mountain range in height. They were radiant and vibrant, resembling a fairyland. The Taihang mountain range had expanded greatly, becoming even more majestic than before. Both Chu Feng and Zhou Quan had grown up in this area. They were too familiar with it. The current changes could only be described as magnificent, with a primordial aura rushing towards them. This left them both shocked and amazed. Do you think there might be divine fruits or immortal abodes here? Zhou Quan wondered aloud, his eyes sparkling. They had seen some reports on their communicators. Places like Song Mountain and Wangu Mountain had experienced various miraculous phenomena, with ordinary rocks even exuding purple mists. The young man who ate a strange silver fruit and grew silver wings lived near Wangu Mountain and was subsequently taken away by divine beings. This made Zhou Quan's mind race with thoughts. Chu Feng stayed calm. Wake up. Don't get your hopes up. With so many giant mountains, there will undoubtedly be fierce birds and beasts within. If a few were to rush out, it could lead to a major incident. Zhou Quan jumped at these words. It was not impossible, and it might happen at any moment. Roar, as if to confirm Chu Feng's words, a beast's roar came from deep within the mountains. Then, a cloud of smoke erupted, and a giant beast howled at the sky, venting its frustration. Zhou Quan's hair stood on end as he looked towards the mountain range, searching for the source of the noise. It's that mountain. I think I see a creature standing on the peak and howling. He stammered, pointing towards a giant mountain in the range. Even though they were far away, they could vaguely see a flickering flame, as if a red-haired beast was standing there, roaring and then swallowing the essence of the sun and the moon. There really were beasts, and their homes were just outside the Taihang mountains. It was too dangerous. Zhou Quan's face drained of color. He and Chu Feng had just returned home and encountered this. Were they going to have to flee again? Whoosh! It seemed as if a wind had started blowing from afar, and a dark cloud drifted by, finally descending into the mountains. A giant bird. Chu Feng's eyes twitched. How big was that bird? Did I see that correctly? Zhou Quan's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. The giant bird, its body a dull gray, landed deep within the mountain range. What if it targets people outside for hunting? We won't even have a chance to escape. Zhou Quan sighed. That kind of bird was fast. If it wanted to leave the mountains, it would be there in the blink of an eye. Just as they were talking, a purple bird, not as big as the previous one but still not small, about 10 or so meters long, spread its wings and flew from the mountains towards the outside. That it was very unique. its feathers dazzling with an astonishing luster, as if made of metal. Damn it, I really jinxed it. A fierce bird is really coming out. Zhou Quan wished he could slap his own mouth. Both of them felt a chill run down their spines. They quickly hid behind a big tree by the road, fearing that they would be detected and become the first prey. In the darkness of the night, the divine bird emitted a bright glow, like a purple ribbon, rushing excitedly towards the outside of the mountains, as if craving for something. Boom! Suddenly, its body erupted into a ball of purple flame, illuminating the sky and making it as bright as day, with a roaring fire burning. This sight made one's heart tremble. The fire, even from a distance, made one's heart palpitate. Zhou Quan wiped the sweat from his forehead. The purple giant bird was like a purple sun across the sky, making the place extraordinarily bright. How terrifying! This is a demonic bird. Just one of these can destroy a town. Zhou Quan murmured, his heart filled with worry. Chu Feng was also silent because who knew how many terrifying beasts and birds there were in the Taihang Mountains. Just now, hundreds, if not thousands, of giant mountains had appeared. However, a mournful cry in the sky startled them both. The purple flames were raging, the giant bird was burning, crying out in pain, struggling violently and falling towards the ground. What was going on? Chu Feng and Zhou Quan looked at each other. Just moments ago, it was awe-inspiring, ready to take flight and pounce outside the mountains. They thought those flames were a display of its power, but who knew it would end up setting itself on fire? Puff! In midair, an explosion was heard. The purple giant bird disintegrated before it even hit the ground. Along with the fire, it turned into a large patch of ashes, fluttering down. It was dead just like that? Chu Feng and Zhou Quan didn't speak for a long time. May the divine mountains bless us. Finally, Zhou Quan broke the silence. He made a fist and bowed in the direction of the Taihang mountain range. The fat man had become somewhat superstitious, driven to this point by all the strange events. Suddenly, there was another stir deep within the Taihang mountain range. A creature, emitting red light, shaped like a crocodile standing upright but with wings and about 10 meters long, its body fiery red, flew out. Boom! As it approached the outside of the mountains, a fierce flame exploded. It too started to burn, screaming as it fell from the midair, turning into black ash. Another big one has fallen. At this point, Chu Feng and Zhou Quan began to suspect something. Could they not get out? The two looked at each other, both hesitating for a moment. Shall we go over and take a look? The world was changing dramatically, filled with anomalies. They knew that the future world might be completely different. If they were bold and proactive, perhaps they could see some unexpected opportunities at the very beginning. Of course, they might also lose their lives in the process. Both were brave, and despite some concerns, they couldn't help but move forward. It was impossible to go into the mountains, but they wanted to take a look from outside. What was there that led to the destruction of the giant beasts? It didn't seem too far, but they had to walk quite a distance before they reached the mouth of the mountain range. There were large patches of black ash on the ground, along with charred bones, parts that were not completely burned. Why do I feel like there's a torrent of evil energy ahead? For some reason, Zhou Quan felt his legs trembling, almost unable to stand, his calf muscles cramping, shaking non-stop. Chu Feng also felt a deep sense of unease, as if he was being watched by a fierce beast. His body stiffened, his hair stood on end, and his eyelids jumped uncontrollably. The two took a deep breath and kept retreating. Their initial thoughts were too naive. Now, it was dangerous to get too close to this mountain range, which was completely different from before. Moments later, as they hid in the woods, they suddenly saw pairs of lantern-like orbs of light appearing at the exit of the mountain range. Some were blood red, some were ghostly blue, and some were golden yellow, all very cold. There were too many. That place was packed. Eyes, there are pairs and pairs of eyes there, they want to come out. Zhou Quan whispered in a strange voice, almost frightened out of his wits. So many pairs of eyes, glaringly conspicuous at the dark mountain mouth, many as large as basins, the thought of which gave one the creeps. For some reason, it was extremely dark there, unlike the luminous depths of the mountain range. The light seemed to have been absorbed, and only those terrifying and ruthless eyes could be seen clearly. Bang! Suddenly, a creature rushed out, the ground trembled, the forest shook, leaves rustled and fell, creating a horrifying scene. However, just like the terrifying scene they had seen earlier, the moment it rushed out of the mountain mouth, it disintegrated with a loud bang, turning into a flame and burning to ashes. Is it self-immolating, not wanting to live? Zhou Quan murmured. He sounded relaxed, but in reality, his legs were shaking. Afterward, several roars echoed, and prehistoric beasts rushed out, even a house-sized silver spider. The scene was terrifying, but the end result was the same. They all turned to ashes, not a single one made it to the outside world alive. Mount Taihang. Zhou Quan almost knelt down, muttering to himself incessantly. A long time later, there was no movement at the dark mountain mouth, and it was eerily silent, but the prehistoric evil aura was still there, clearly still dangerous, and those creatures had not left. Not until the golden dawn flowed, a hazy light appeared, and tranquility was broken. A small calf, about a meter tall, slowly moved outward. It walked very slowly, as if it was very scared, but also hopeful. It cautiously and carefully moved forward. Is this calf made of gold? Zhou Quan was dumbfounded. Chu Feng was also astonished. Looking ahead, the calf was golden all over, glowing in the dark, its fur shiny, just like it was cast in gold. Even its pupils and a pair of small horns were golden. It didn't have the clumsiness of an ordinary calf. It had a sense of spirituality, extraordinary at first glance. At the very least, they had never seen a golden calf before. The mountain mouth was very quiet, and pair after pair of cold, lantern-like eyes were fixed on the golden calf, watching whether it could make it out alive. 1 step, 2 steps, 10 steps, until 100 steps, the calf remained unharmed, nothing happened to it. It was very excited, showing human-like emotions. Its courage grew, and it quickened its pace. In the end, it managed to walk out of the mountain mouth alive and appeared outside the mountain range. Zhou Quan cursed under his breath. He was somewhat worried, but also eager to try. He whispered, "A golden calf has walked out, golden all over. There must be something extraordinary about it. It's so small, can we catch it?" Chu Feng shook his head in disagreement. The calf, although only a meter tall and still a young one, was far from simple. Rushing towards it recklessly might prove dangerous. Under the bright moonlight in the forest, the golden calf was excited. After successfully breaking free, it twisted its head, shook its tail, and then leaped high into the air, letting out a low moo. The forest was abundant with plants, many of which were flowering. Upon seeing this, the golden calf became tense. It suppressed its excitement and cautiously approached, as if facing a formidable enemy. Clearly, it felt that it hadn't completely escaped danger. It moved slowly, its golden hooves landing lightly. When it approached a cluster of mountain vine flowers, it gently sniffed, and then stood still. Its short horns shone with a golden luster. It confirmed that it was unharmed, then once again moved towards an area with more plants. Pollen, catalyst. Chu Feng mused. He could see clearly that the calf was swallowing pollen, as if testing something. It was very tense, and it made a large loop, touching many mountain flowers. In recent days, the most common abnormality in the world was the rapid growth of various plants and the large-scale blooming of flowers, which were different from usual. After making a round, the golden calf's body suddenly emitted golden flames. Moo, it let out a low moo, its body trembling with fear. This sign indicated that it could follow the fate of those beasts earlier and be burned to death. At the mountain entrance, pairs of lantern-like eyes were staring, filled with a dreadful aura. Is it going to die too? Zhou Quan was surprised. Surrounded by flames, the calf was very panicked. It was unwilling, constantly mooing, its bright golden fur shaking, causing ripples, as if trying to drive away the flames. However, this time was different. The golden calf was not burned to death. The flames that had just risen quickly extinguished, without harming it. Roar! In the mountains, the roars of beasts resounded. Those fierce birds and beasts were restless. Chu Feng covered his ears, but his blood still churned from the shock. Zhou Quan was even worse off, feeling dizzy and falling onto the ground, almost fainting. The golden calf had passed through the ghost gate and was no longer tense. It was no longer afraid, its hooves stomping, mooing incessantly. Stimulated by this outcome, 6 or 7 creatures rushed out of the mountains one after another. Some spread their wings, some ran, the wind howled, and the forest trembled. However, their endings were miserable. All of them failed, turning into balls of fire, disintegrating at the edge of the mountains, leaving only piles of ashes. In the end, the entrance to the mountain was silent, and no more beasts came out. The golden calf, who had survived, was shaking its head and wagging its tail, its mood elevated. Then it did something that left Chu Feng and Zhou Quan speechless. It actually sat down like a human, with its 2 hind legs coiled. Although it was very awkward, shaky, and unstable, that was what it meant. Then, it raised its 2 front hooves, one pointing to the sky and the other to the ground, and it kept mooing. Moo, moo, moo. What is it doing? Has it studied Buddhism before? Zhou Quan looked as if he had seen a ghost. This guy, it's actually posing like Buddha's birth, one hand pointing to the sky, one hand pointing to the ground, saying, "In the sky and the earth, I alone am supreme." Zhou Quan's eyes widened. It was just a calf, but it was making such a move, which he found too ridiculous. Zhou Quan nudged Chu Feng and whispered, "I think we should be able to catch it. It's still a calf, it must be easy to handle." Before Chu Feng could respond, the golden calf turned over, landed on all 4s, shook its golden fur, and slowly walked over. "We've been spotted." Zhou Quan was startled. "Don't act rashly." Chu Feng always felt that this kind of creature was extraordinary. Even at a young age. The golden calf was slow, its nose twitching, walking straight to Zhou Quan. Then it unexpectedly bit his backpack and pulled hard. "Trying to steal my stuff?" Zhou Quan pulled back forcefully, quickly protecting it, then very fiercely, he rolled over, ready to ride on the calf's back. Unfortunately, this golden calf was very agile. It shook forcefully, throwing him off, and stood up straight, using its 2 front hooves, wrestling style, to flip Zhou Quan over. Zhou Quan was a bit stunned. What kind of bull was this, capable of wrestling? It was so small, yet it had him pinned down. I'm going to fight you. Zhou Quan scrambled up and rushed over, grabbing the golden calf and wrestling with it. Seeing this, Chu Feng was somewhat speechless. He had already pulled out the black short sword, ready to slash over to help Zhou Quan, but now he held back because he saw that the calf didn't have much killing intent. Its eyes were rolling around like a human's, very spirited that he didn't feel like he was facing a wild beast, but rather a high-level primate. He felt that it didn't have much malice, however, he couldn't just watch Zhou Quan suffer. He quickly rushed over to help, grabbing the calf's horns, trying to pin it to the ground. This calf, it's after my fruit. Zhou Quan shouted. During this process, the golden calf was incredibly strong. Standing on its two hind legs, it held Zhou Quan with its two front hooves, throwing him around. Zhou Quan was angry. If he was knocked over by a bull, that would be one thing, but now he was being wrestled to the ground by a calf, leaving him covered in dust. He was so angry he could hardly breathe straight. Chu Feng helped, holding tightly to the calf's horns, pulling it to one side that he saw that if the calf really went mad and used its golden horns to hit Zhou Quan, it would definitely poke a hole in him. It was too strong, but it didn't show much hostility and didn't do so, but at this moment, Zhou Quan was extremely angry because he saw that the calf was actually laughing. It was grinning so wide that its mouth was almost split to its ears, laughing at him. You bastard, pinning me down, and then laughing and mocking me, get up. Zhou Quan was furious. With a pop, the golden calf bit open his backpack and was about to swallow the strange, fragrant, red fruit. Zhou Quan was anxious and exerted all his strength to push away its head. Although he had always been afraid to eat this fruit, he had never intended to give up. He had been weighing it all this time. The young man who had sprouted silver wings looked like he had transcended in every way. Otherwise, why would the higher beings of the divine creatures greet him like they were welcoming a new noble? Chu Feng helped. He let go of the horns and grabbed its neck, forcibly moving it away. He couldn't just watch the fruit be stolen and eaten by this calf. The golden calf was very persistent, still opening its mouth wide to bite. Pop! The red fruit burst open, red light spilled out, making the place holy. The fruit was fragrant, and the rich scent was lingering. Chu Feng was startled. Was the fruit swallowed by the golden calf? However, when he looked down, he saw the chubby figure lying on the ground coughing, his face red from suffocation, patting his chest continuously. At the crucial moment, he was quite bold. He directly stuffed the red fruit into his mouth. In just a few bites, he swallowed it down, not even spitting out the core, choking him until his eyes rolled back. The golden calf put down its front hooves, no longer wrestling with Zhou Quan, standing there on all fours. It seemed very angry. The fruit was too tempting for it, and it was so angry that smoke was coming out of its nose. Obviously, it was not a beast. Even in such a disappointing situation, it did not have any killing intent. I'm choking to death, water, water, water. Zhou Quan called out, coughing continuously, with tears and snot flowing together. Chu Feng pulled him up from the ground, handed him a bottle of water, and helped him pat his back. Finally, Zhou Quan came around. You're still too tender to compete with me. He glared at the golden calf, and at the same time, he was very angry, saying, you little calf, you actually wrestled with me, rolling around on the ground. I'm so angry. How do you feel now? The fruit tastes good, right? Chu Feng asked, really worried that something might happen to him. The fruit juice is sweet, but I didn't have time to savor it carefully. I just swallowed it directly. Zhou Quan regretted, smacking his lips continuously, trying to recall the taste. I feel a bit cold in my body, and there's a force rushing around. As he said this, he closed his eyes to feel it. At this moment, the golden calf was staring at him, finally fixing its gaze on the verdant grass in his hand. This was a common type of weed, but after bearing red fruit, it seemed different, brimming with vitality and a strong life force. Do you want to compete with me? Zhou Quan glared back, plucking a leaf as he spoke and stuffing it into his mouth, biting down hard. Hey, that's a grass leaf, you can't eat it. Stop being so stubborn, Chu Feng reminded him. Pa, it's bitter. It tastes terrible. Zhou Quan felt as if he had been struck dumb by the calf. Otherwise, why would he do something as foolish as eating grass leaves for no reason? Across from him, the golden calf was staring at him angrily. Not only was its nose puffing out white smoke, but its ears were also beginning to emit white vapor. It almost charged at him. Don't come over here, isn't it enough if I give it to you? Zhou Quan, feeling a bit guilty, handed over the lush green grass. Crunch! The golden calf swallowed half of it in one bite, almost biting his hand. Zhou Quan quickly let go of the grass and retreated in fright. I gave you the grass, so stop glaring at me. Also, stop puffing out white smoke from your nose and ears. What are you so angry about? I'm the one who should be angry, I almost broke my bones from the fall, Zhou Quan said. The golden calf calmed down. Can you understand what we're saying? Chu Feng wanted to communicate with it. He wanted to understand the changes in Taihang Mountain clearly. This calf had come from inside, and perhaps it knew the whole truth. The golden calf didn't nod or shake its head. Instead, it began to look at him. It can't understand you. You have to do it this way. Zhou Quan grabbed a handful of grass and walked over to it, smiling with ill intent. Little guy, eat up. Let's get closer. How about being Zhou's mount? I'll feed you fresh grass every day. At that moment, the golden calf lifted its head and glanced at him. The look in its eyes made Zhou Quan question his life. Because the golden calf seemed to be filled with a certain disdain and contempt. Hey, did you feel that? Zhou Quan asked Chu Feng. I have this illusion that this calf is looking down on me, like it's looking at an idiot. That's true, Chu Feng nodded. I was looked down upon by a calf. Zhou Quan was furious. Then, he pointed at the golden calf and said, you ate my special grass, so you have to be my mount. Do you hear me? Whoosh! The next moment, the golden calf's hooves dug into the ground, and it moved too fast, appearing behind Zhou Quan. Then, it stood up, leaning on him, its front hooves resting on his shoulders, and finally, it wrapped its hooves around his neck. What the @Yuan? Zhou Quan was furious. This calf was like a dog skin plaster, clinging to him. What's going on? I told you to be my mount, what are you doing? He yelled in frustration. I think it wants to make you its mount, Chu Feng laughed heartily. Upon reflection, Zhou Quan thought the calf was indeed implying that. Especially when he turned his head and saw it grinning, laughing foolishly, and even nodding at him. In Zhou Quan's view, that expression was too annoying. Get off me! There was a commotion in the forest. Half an hour later, Zhou Quan was panting. He was running in front while a golden calf was chasing behind. From time to time, it would stand on its hind hooves and try to get on Zhou Quan's back. Help! Zhou Quan was utterly dispirited. After such a long struggle, he found that he couldn't deal with this calf. Instead of gaining a mount, he was going to be ridden. I don't know where you come from, but I know that our changing world has a fatal attraction to you, Chu Feng began. Suddenly, the golden calf stopped and no longer chased Zhou Quan, but looked at Chu Feng. Even if they know they might die, those fierce birds and beasts still want to rush into our world. That shows how great the temptation is, Chu Feng continued. He successfully attracted the calf's attention and quieted it down. Zhou Quan, who had just been badly bullied, finally got a break and hid behind Chu Feng. He was sweaty and sat on the ground. I was humiliated by a calf. It's so embarrassing. He cursed in a low voice, not daring to provoke it anymore. At the same time, he was also attracted by Chu Feng's words and listened attentively. After our world changed, even a weed by the roadside might bear strange fruits. Some people can fly in the sky and escape into the ground after eating these fruits. I think there will be even more astonishing fruits in the future. You came for this, Chu Feng said. He continued to speculate, I think at this initial stage, the changes might be the most intense. It's possible that within a short period, a king could be created. So you came. King was the term Chu Feng thought of as a metaphor. He knew that the golden calf should understand. The golden calf became even quieter. Where exactly do you come from? Chu Feng asked softly. The golden calf remained silent, neither mooing nor nodding or shaking its head. It just calmly stared at Chu Feng, seemingly pondering something. I suspect there's something strange about this calf. Let's not provoke it any further, Zhou Quan interjected. He was a bit afraid after the ordeal he'd just experienced and no longer wanted to draw the attention of the golden calf. Pollen, catalyst. Suddenly, Chu Feng uttered these words when Lin Nuai graduated and left school. Her family had sent a car to pick her up. They'd vaguely mentioned these words, but he'd been standing too far away at the time, treated with indifference, and hadn't been able to hear clearly after these words were spoken. The golden calf's eyes shone brightly, and it nodded at him, finally responding that it understood Chu Feng's words. Those words had touched a nerve. Chu Feng was slightly stunned. He inferred that the so-called exotic fruit might not be the most important thing. The pollen from some exotic flowers might be more crucial. Even so, when Chu Feng asked other questions, it still did not answer, showing no signs. I once saw a bronze mountain on the western plateau. After a thunderstorm, it appeared. On it, an unusual plant took root. Its blooming flowers emitted such a fragrance that one could smell it from afar, making one feel light and airy, as if about to ascend to immortality. Chu Feng said this, testing the calf. Zhou Quan was a bit stunned, quietly listening on the side. The golden calf could no longer remain calm. It became excited, approached Chu Feng, kept nodding its head, and started mooing, as if urging him to continue. Chu Feng was puzzled. Was the flower from that small tree really that important? From his previous encounter, he had only felt a faint warmth and no other changes, but judging from the excited state of the golden calf, its desire for the flowers bloomed by that small tree far exceeded its reaction to the red fruit Zhou Quan had earlier. I encountered a golden giant bird, a mystical mastiff, and a big black cow of your kind there, Chu Feng said while observing its expression. This golden calf was as expressive as a human. Upon hearing this, it opened its mouth wide, looking both shocked and nervous. It was very concerned about the outcome of this matter. In our world, yaks, mastiffs, and the like are not considered top primates. They have not fully developed their intelligence. But the ones that appeared on the Bronze Mountain are very different, even more spiritual than humans, Chu Feng said slowly, observing its reaction and making guesses. As expected, upon hearing this, the golden calf looked serious, as if it highly regarded those creatures. I think, under the conditions of the past, they could all open their wisdom. In the Western Plateau, they were unmatched. So, when this world changes, they might become even more extraordinary, even reaching sainthood. The golden calf listened intently, nodding unconsciously. Apparently, this was a subconscious behavior. Acknowledging this theory, suddenly, it came back to its senses, calming down, no longer showing any emotional fluctuations, not wanting to reveal its thoughts, but Chu Feng saw clearly and confirmed his suspicion. I wonder, after the dramatic changes in our world, can we call it the primitive stage? In this early primitive stage, is it easy to become a saint? Chu Feng carefully chose his words, trying to find a term to describe that unknown level. The pupils of the golden calf contracted. Clearly, this had touched its heartstrings again. You came here one after another, which indicates that the so-called primitive stage is beyond imagination. Are you all trying to find the opportunity to become saints? Chu Feng said again. Zhou Quan was shocked, then felt extremely impressed. Chu Feng had probed from some details and gradually sketched out the possible vague outlines after the change. Now, even Zhou Quan had grasped some directions. He was secretly surprised and also began to guess along with Chu Feng's thoughts. This golden calf obviously looked at Chu Feng a bit more kindly, even valuing him somewhat. At least it didn't look at him the same way it looked at Zhou Quan. What do you mean? When you look at me, you look like you're looking at an idiot, with contempt and disdain. But when you look at him, you're very equal, even valuing him. You little calf, you're driving me crazy. Zhou Quan felt hurt, especially now, when the golden calf was grinning at him, silently mocking him, and its gaze was too obvious. In the latter half of the night, the mountain was quiet. They had moved far away from the exit of the Taihang Mountains and could no longer feel the terrifying aura of the ferocious birds and beasts. Moonlight was like water, spilling through the forest, with a faint glow flowing. Brother, was the little tree you saw on the Bronze Mountain really that amazing? The flowers were obtained by 3 monsters, didn't you get anything? Zhou Quan asked. 4 petals fell into my palm, Chu Feng replied. Did you really get something? Zhou Quan had only asked casually before. In his view, with such a powerful mastiff and golden giant bird there, it would be good enough for Chu Feng to come down the mountain alive. At this moment, the golden calf seemed very excited. It rushed over and used its head to touch Chu Feng's palm, its eyes wide open, as if it was trying to see something. It's been many days, they're long gone, Chu Feng laughed. However, the golden calf still wouldn't leave. It circled around him, and its eyes were strange. In the end, it even stood upright, stretched out a forehoof, pointed at Chu Feng, and its expression was complex, filled with excitement and regret. What do you know? Tell me quickly. Zhou Quan glared at the calf. Moo! The calf mooed in response. Zhou Quan was so angry that he really wanted to slap it, but he didn't dare. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan walked ahead, and the golden calf followed behind. It didn't leave, and it seemed like it was going to follow them all the way. They were headed to a county town named Shunping. Zhou Quan's home was there. They had been delayed for too long and were finally nearing. Calf, do you have a name? You've been following us all this time, and we don't know what to call you. Should we always call you Little Calf? Zhou Quan looked back, then, he enthusiastically helped it come up with a name. You're just this little, yet you're very naughty, and you're a monster. I think we should call you Bull Demon King. It's both majestic and sounds good. Zhou Quan strongly persuaded it to accept. Bang! As a result, he was kicked by a hoof and fell to the ground, unable to get up for a long time. Damn it, Bull Demon King. Zhou Quan grunted for a while before finally getting up, feeling like rushing up to fight it. Eventually, they entered the county town. It wasn't large, and it was already late at night. The streets were quiet, occasionally a cat would run by, and the street lights were very dim. Chu Feng said goodbye to Zhou Quan. He still had to walk more than 10 miles to get home. Zhou Quan tried hard to keep him, wanting him to leave tomorrow morning. Chu Feng shook his head. He had a kind of worry. If a night passed, perhaps the 10 miles would turn into dozens or even hundreds of miles. The world had changed dramatically over the past 2 days, and it was unpredictable. Brother, take care. Once I meet my family and settle down, I'll come to find you, Zhou Quan said that he understood that perhaps in the near future, the entire world would be different. This fellow villager and friend he had met on the road was worth befriending. Seeing the golden calf decisively follow Chu Feng without even considering, and not even glancing at him, Zhou Quan was so angry that he gritted his teeth. You heartless calf, you ate my exotic grass, and you didn't show any signs of parting? Zhou Quan shouted from behind. Upon hearing this, the golden calf didn't turn its head. It lazily raised its tail high and shook it at him. Zhou Quan was dumbfounded. He had never seen a cow raise its tail high. This was a sign of contempt. Get lost, you bull demon king. Zhou Quan exclaimed in annoyance that he wanted to find a car for Chu Feng, but was rejected. The little bull was golden all over, too conspicuous, and should not be seen by too many people. At this moment, Zhou Quan was very tired and wanted to fall asleep immediately. He felt a peculiar change in his body since he ate that fruit. Goodbye. Although it was the middle of the night, it was not dark. The bright moon hung high, casting a silvery glow over the land. Illuminated by the moonlight, the golden little bull shone brilliantly. On the road, Chu Feng was very curious and tried to touch the bull. Indeed, it was fur, not metal. It was smooth and soft, like silk, only the two golden horns were cold and hard. Qingyang town was a dozen miles away from the county seat. Chu Feng was born here and lived here until he was 10 years old when he moved with his parents to Shantian, a huge city 200 miles away. Shantian, known as the city of 6 ancient dynasties, was the largest city in the north. However, over the years, his family would still return to Qingyang town during holidays, always feeling closer here. Although it was late at night, Chu Feng couldn't help but activate his communicator to contact his parents, and got through quickly. During the day, he had already contacted them and knew that they were still in Shantian and hadn't returned yet. Now, he knew about the anomaly in the Taihang Mountains. It was very dangerous. If a few ferocious birds and beasts escaped, it would be a disaster. Therefore, he did not want his parents to rush back. Dad, I'm almost home. After the call connected, he briefly and directly informed them of the situation here and solemnly told them not to come back. He might go there instead. In Chu Feng's view, that place was, after all, the center of the north, the largest city. If there was any danger, the protection should be the highest. The call lasted a long time, but he finally persuaded his parents to wait in the giant city. The night was quiet, and he finally arrived home. It was a 2-story building, located on the easternmost side of Qingyang town, with a large yard and adjacent to an orchard. From here, one could see the Taihang Mountains, a unique view. This was also the reason why Chu Feng's family liked to come back here. It was late at night, and after Chu Feng brought the golden little bull into the yard, he didn't bother with it anymore. He was really tired. He went upstairs, entered his room, and fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. In the early morning, the golden dawn poured into the room. The sun was just rising, spraying the morning glow full of life. Although he went to bed late, Chu Feng was the first to wake up. He first turned on his communicator to see if there were any sensational news, as there were anomalies everywhere and various signs worth noting. God King. He was astonished when he saw this report on the internet. In the past 2 days, apart from that mysterious young man with silver wings, there have been 3 cases of human mutations. Moreover, it had been confirmed that these 3 people had obtained quite terrifying supernatural abilities. Some people referred to these individuals as God Kings. One article analyzed that if this continued, more people would gain supernatural abilities and might usher in a mysterious era. The earliest ones with superpowers could potentially lead others. It was not impossible that they might one day be revered as God Kings. For example, the young man with silver wings who was taken away by the divine creature, who could now fly through the sky and earth. His future was unimaginable. Chu Feng put down his communicator and walked downstairs to the yard. He was immediately startled because he saw the golden little bull bathed in the brilliant morning glow, sitting in a very strange posture. At this moment, it was sitting on its hind legs like a human, its forelegs naturally spread out, facing the rising sun, and inhaling the morning glow. This was too strange. It was clearly a bull, but it was sitting cross-legged, as if breathing in and out. Chu Feng found it strange and felt that its breathing method had a peculiar rhythm and an inexplicable rule. Out of curiosity, he watched for a long time, then followed its rhythm and tried it himself. The breathing technique was peculiar in rhythm, alternating between heavy and weak, swiftly then slowly, somewhat complex. Chu Feng, though quite astute, initially found it challenging to adapt. Several times, the abrupt shifts between exhalation and inhalation left him coughing violently, as if he had been choked by water. The golden calf opened its eyes, saw this scene, and immediately burst into laughter. What are you laughing at? Chu Feng glared at it, finally sharing Zhou Quan's sentiment. Being mocked by a calf indeed made him want to punch it. The dawn was brilliant, filled with vibrant vitality. The golden calf sat there, extraordinarily stable, breathing in and out, a fragrant white mist emanating from its nostrils. As it breathed, the pure white mist flowed in and out of its nostrils, mingling with the morning glow, collecting the essence of the sun and the moon. It was visible that during this special breathing process, its body glowed brightly, as if cast in gold, appearing more extraordinary. Moo! As it roared, a white mist sprayed from its nostrils, exploding in the air like muted thunder, deafening and surprising. The sudden sound startled Chu Feng. If that white mist were to hit a person, they would probably be knocked flying. Whether their body would be torn to pieces was uncertain. Is it that powerful? Chu Feng was amazed. This was just a breath exhaled by the golden calf, yet it had such destructive power. Can I learn this breathing technique? He asked, his eyes burning with desire. The golden calf looked extremely proud, raising its head as if full of confidence and arrogance. Chu Feng instinctively sensed that this calf seemed extraordinarily conceited about the breathing technique it had mastered. He thought it must be something extraordinary. Does this breathing technique have a notable origin? Chu Feng asked. After all, it was just a calf, only a meter high. It certainly didn't develop it on its own. The golden calf suddenly became a bit nervous, looking extremely cautious. Chu Feng was surprised. Was it more mysterious than he imagined, even reluctant to discuss it? Can I learn from you? He asked hopefully. He was worried, hoping to protect himself in the future. The world was undergoing dramatic changes, with various anomalies appearing. Some humans had mutated, gaining supernatural abilities. What would transpire was anyone's guess. He could imagine that, besides humans, other species were evolving too, like the giant vine that hung in the sky, pulling down satellites. In the future, danger would be everywhere. Furthermore, there were some famous mountains and rivers, like the towering mountains that mysteriously emerged in the depths of Taihang mountain range, accompanied by ferocious beasts. And these might just be the tip of the iceberg. Therefore, Chu Feng felt a sense of urgency. He wanted to protect himself and survive in this ever-changing world. The golden calf was mystical, giving him hope. The golden calf seemed conflicted, sitting there motionless, seemingly considering. You know, I've seen the strange little tree on Bronze Mountain. I can take you there in the future. Chu Feng smiled, attempting to entice the calf, adding, as long as I survive. Moo! The golden calf seemed to make a decision, letting out a low moo and nodding solemnly. Chu Feng was overjoyed, not expecting it to go so smoothly. He was really afraid that the golden calf would be stubborn and ignore him. The golden calf gestured towards the sun with one of its front hooves, then signaled for Chu Feng to face the east like it was, welcoming the morning glow, and begin the peculiar breathing technique. Chu Feng learned things quickly, and this time was no exception. He imitated the calf's breathing rhythm, sometimes heavy, sometimes faint. To the average person, this would seem quite accurate, a very close imitation. However, Chu Feng didn't feel any comfort. A few times he nearly choked, feeling as if he was holding his breath, somewhat dizzy. This was clearly abnormal because he saw the golden calf making comfortable snoring sounds as it breathed, its eyes closed, almost falling asleep, and emitting a fragrance. Just a calf, yet it naturally emitted a fragrance while breathing, which was truly strange. Chu Feng frowned and stopped. He realized a serious problem. This breathing technique might be extraordinary, but it might not be suitable for humans. The golden calf sensed something and opened its eyes, looking puzzled, as if asking why he had stopped. Chu Feng was straightforward, saying, I'm a bit worried whether humans can adapt to this breathing rhythm. Unexpectedly, the golden calf nodded without hesitation, giving him a very affirmative answer. This surprised Chu Feng, and he confirmed again, asking, really no problem? What exactly is this breathing technique, and can other species also practice it? The golden calf was filled with pride. When it came to this technique, it grinned, raising its head high, as if extremely self-satisfied. Its posture was obvious, as if this was the world's #1 breathing technique. A very extraordinary breathing technique? Chu Feng was skeptical. The golden calf sat there, raising its front hooves, one pointing to the sky and the other to the ground, mooing repeatedly, moo, moo, moo. All right, I get it. You are unparalleled in heaven and earth, Chu Feng quickly said, fearing it might start reciting a sutra. He sat down again, trying to match the golden calf's breathing rhythm, but the effect was still minimal, and he didn't feel anything special. Chu Feng persisted and didn't give up. Although this breathing technique was complex and had a peculiar rhythm, he still remembered it accurately, feeling no discrepancy, but it was ineffective until suddenly, a thunderous moo echoed. The self-absorbed calf let out a deafening moo, as if containing some strange power. At that moment, everything here resonated with it. A faint fragrance permeated the air, a cloud of pure white mist enveloped the area, and a ceaseless rumble filled the atmosphere. Chu Feng felt a buzzing in his ears, and then a resonation within himself. All other sounds faded away, leaving only one kind of breath in his ears. It was the rhythm of the golden calf's breath, precise to the extreme. What he had imitated earlier was only the form, but now he sensed the spirit. Even more, he could hear the sound of blood flowing inside the golden calf, which, combined with its breathing rhythm, resulted in extraordinary power. Chu Feng understood. He had learned the form first, and now he had obtained that spirit. That spirit of the breathing technique was given to him by the golden calf in a very special way. It could be considered a secret transmission, for without it, merely having that form would be useless. The mooing, the thunder, the white mist, all appeared together. The spirit was contained within them, and he finally perceived it clearly and received the inheritance. Chu Feng opened his eyes, the white mist dispersed, returning into the golden calf. He nodded solemnly, expressing his gratitude that he began to practice this breathing technique with peace of mind. Everything was different, producing immediate effects. Facing the rising sun, with his breath, he felt the vigorous vitality that in this early morning, he was more relaxed than ever before. His body was comfortable, all his pores were open, and a warm current was surging. Gradually, Chu Feng became motionless, completely immersing himself in it. The golden morning light fell on him, giving his face a thin layer of golden glow. The golden calf opened its mouth, looking somewhat surprised, and stared at him for a long time. When Chu Feng opened his eyes again, the sun was already high in the sky. He felt full of strength, refreshed, and even though he had only slept for 2 or 3 hours at night, he felt better than ever before. This is indeed miraculous. Chu Feng exclaimed that he felt so comfortable that every movement was full of vigor. His body even had a translucent glow, and he was full of energy, with seemingly endless strength that he wanted to continue, feeling that doing so was a pleasure. However, the golden calf stopped him, indicating that it was enough. Is it enough to practice this breathing technique only once a day? Chu Feng was surprised. The golden calf nodded. This was quite unexpected for Chu Feng. Next, Chu Feng cleaned the house that he hadn't lived in for a long time, and then went out for a big shopping spree. The supermarket was somewhat empty. He went to several places and did his best to buy some necessities of life, enough to last for a while. Obviously, in the past few days, various reports had caused panic, almost emptying the major markets. Zhou Fatso is right, I should give you a name, otherwise how should I call you in daily life? Chu Feng wanted to ask the golden calf's original name, but it only mooed a few times, completely not understanding. In fact, the name, Bull Demon King, is quite good, he suggested, but as soon as he mentioned it, the golden calf showed a disdainful look. It always felt that the fat man was an idiot, and didn't want a name. He casually came up with In the end, with no other options, Chu Feng casually mentioned a few names. Unexpectedly, the name Yellow Bull, which he mentioned unintentionally, was quite liked by the golden calf. Chu Feng was taken aback, opened his mouth to say something, but the golden calf had already settled on this name. Chu Feng had a strange look on his face. He wondered what Zhou Quan's reaction would be when he saw the bull next time. He had gone to great lengths to come up with a domineering name for the golden calf, Bull Demon King, but it didn't want it, only wanting the name Yellow Bull. Shall we change it? Chu Feng tried to negotiate with it. Moo! Yellow Bull glared, somewhat dissatisfied that it was golden all over and took pride in it. Chu Feng guessed, could there be some hidden story? Like the so-called golden bloodline, so it quite liked the name Yellow Bull. At noon, Chu Feng prepared some fresh grass, some pears and apples for Yellow Bull, and he himself ate some simple food. Then, he carefully took out a stone box, 3 inches high, square, simple and unremarkable. Upon seeing the stone box, Yellow Bull's eyes showed a different color, and it silently approached. Don't move, this absolutely cannot be eaten. Chu Feng warned. Yellow Bull stared at those 3 seeds, one was dark, one was flattened, and one was wrinkled. It immediately showed a look of disdain, looking contemptuous. Don't underestimate them, let me tell you, these are not ordinary seeds. Chu Feng deliberately mystified that he knew that the more he did this, the more likely Yellow Bull would not care. Otherwise, he was really afraid that it would swallow them all in one bite. Moo! Yellow Bull shook its head, mocking with a grin. Chu Feng dug the soil in the courtyard and said, let me tell you, I plan to grow the Queen Mother of the West from the first seed, the 9 Heavens Profound Girl from the second seed, and for the third one, let me think about it. Should I add some fertilizer? Chu Feng pondered. He had cleared a patch in the courtyard's flower bed and was somewhat hesitant before burying the seeds. Because he cared deeply, he was very cautious in his approach, refusing to use ordinary fertilizers. He turned to look at the yellow cow, which was still smirking at him, looking as if it was watching a fool. It was clear that the cow believed the 3 wrinkled seeds wouldn't survive. Yellow cow, you need to help. Whether these 3 seeds can sprout depends on you, he said. Seeing his serious expression, the yellow cow was taken aback, quite puzzled. It mooed, as if asking him why he was saying this. You see, the soil in my flower bed is used for growing flowers and plants, and it lacks fertilizer. Could you contribute some? Chu Feng asked quite calmly. The yellow cow was initially confused, but then it understood what he was getting at. It widened its eyes and began to snort, glaring at him. Don't be angry. This isn't a big deal for you. It's a natural process. I'm even allowing you to do it right here in the flower bed, he said. Smoke began to rise from the cow's ears as well, its eyes were filled with a murderous look. It glared at Chu Feng angrily and began to paw at the ground with one hoof, ready to charge at any moment. Don't get so worked up. I'm not disgusted by you. If it smells, I'll just bear with it, Chu Feng said, seemingly oblivious to the danger. Bang! The yellow cow charged, sending him flying. Thankfully, it didn't use its golden horns. Even so, Chu Feng ended up in the flower bed. He grimaced in pain, finally understanding how Zhou Quan felt. Negotiating with a cow was indeed dangerous. In fact, the yellow cow was even angrier than him. Its eyes were fixed on him, somewhat doubting whether this guy was more unreliable than the fat man and deserved a beating. While rubbing his arm, Chu Feng got up and sighed, "You don't understand. These are sacred seeds. I'm afraid ordinary fertilizers won't suffice. You're mysterious, right? Isn't it said that cow dung is very effective? Plus, there's the saying about cow luck, moo." The yellow cow roared. Though it was not big, its voice echoed like thunder in the courtyard. Chu Feng quickly covered his ears. All right, don't come over. If you don't want to contribute, that's fine, Chu Feng said. He saw that the cow was kicking the ground with all four hooves, ready to charge into the flower bed. Chu Feng placed the slightly plump seed in the soil, covered it and began to water it. It's all up to your fate now, he muttered to himself. The 3 seeds had been sealed in the stone box for countless years. He really didn't know whether they could sprout, and felt uncertain. However, if they were not ordinary, their vitality should be very strong. Even if the current environment was not quite suitable, they should be able to survive. It's not a bad thing to not use cow dung, Chu Feng muttered to himself because he had thought of a serious problem. Upon hearing this, the yellow cow looked at him with a bad expression, somewhat puzzled. Chu Feng explained, "What if I really grow a Zhuangmu or Jiutian Zunf? If they found out I used cow dung as fertilizer, they would kill me." The yellow cow was stunned. It then became furious and mooed, wanting to charge again. "Don't come over here. I'm just stating the facts. If they really found out, they would probably think it's the most serious blasphemy. I'd better be safe, be honest, and save everything." Chu Feng laughed. The yellow cow snorted and glared at him before turning to gnaw on a pineapple. "That's my pineapple. You're supposed to eat fresh grass and apples." Chu Feng chased after it and in the end, he buried the 3 seeds in 3 different places. Since the soil for growing flowers varied, he thought it would be safer to spread them out. "I really hope they sprout soon," Chu Feng said optimistically, curious to see what they would grow into. "But if I really grow a Zunf, I have nothing to worry about. After all, I created them. How can there be any blasphemy? Maybe they will be very obedient," he said with a smile on his face. "Moo!" A moo from the cow interrupted his thoughts. The yellow cow was smirking, its eyes slanted, as if it was mocking him for daydreaming, looking quite contemptuous. "Get lost." Chu Feng pushed away the cow's head that had come over. Being constantly mocked by a cow left him somewhat speechless. Suddenly, he heard a loud noise. There was a streak of fire in the distance, extremely dazzling, rushing towards the sky, which shocked him greatly. A missile. Were they going to deal with the plants in outer space? Chu Feng was alarmed. The yellow cow had sharp senses. It opened its eyes wide at the first sign of danger, even before Chu Feng did. Its body tensed up, with waves of light rippling from its golden fur. It was a little nervous, sensing a threat. Chu Feng realized that being able to witness the launch of a missile was quite rare, as people usually wouldn't get to see it. "The fact that I happened to see it being launched not too far away means that the situation is very serious," he said with a serious expression. In the past few days, he had heard many rumors. It was said that such terrifying weapons had been used in outer space for a while now, but it had never been reported. He decided to check the internet, as there should be some news by now. At the same time, his communicator beeped. Zhou Quan was contacting him. After connecting, he immediately heard the excited voice of the fat man. "Bro, did you just see that? It was spectacular. The sword soared into the sky, aiming for outer space. I can't believe I saw it with my own eyes. It might even clean up those weird plants." "I hope it works," Chu Feng replied. But he also reminded Zhou Quan to prepare early to avoid the worst and most terrifying situation. Then, he asked Zhou Quan how he felt after eating that fruit. "There have been significant changes. I won't say more, I'm quite exhausted, about to fall into a deep sleep again." Zhou Quan forced a laugh, somewhat unnaturally. "You didn't grow a tail, did you?" Chu Feng questioned, suspecting that this was why Zhou was acting so evasively. "How is that possible?" Zhou protested loudly, trying hard to explain that he hadn't turned into an ugly monster. "So what's wrong with you, why are you hesitating?" Chu Feng asked. I've grown a horn," Zhou Quan exclaimed, almost in tears. Then he cursed loudly. "It must be that bull demon king's doing, it looks just like a bull's horn." He cursed loudly, his voice echoing. The yellow bull was curious about Chu Feng's communicator, staring at it intently. It also heard Zhou's curses, and immediately leaned over, mockingly mooing at the communicator. "Moo, moo, moo, bull demon king. Are you saying I look like a bull?" that I'll end up mooing like you? Zhou Quan was furious. With a click, Chu Feng ended the call, while the yellow bull seemed to be enjoying the situation. Finding Zhou's angry reactions amusing, Chu Feng started to search various reports. There were no official ones, the authorities remained silent about the rumors of those weapons, but there was an abundance of gossip. Even more, some people had uploaded pictures similar to what Chu Feng had seen. This was happening all over the world. People believed that a large-scale bombardment of hot weapons had already begun. Some even reported seeing plant debris falling from the sky. Something big is going to happen, Chu Feng muttered to himself, frowning. If there were results, they should have been announced by now. But the relevant parties are still maintaining silence, indicating that the situation is very serious. Afterwards, he looked at other reports. Indeed, people were very interested in discussing supernatural powers. Even in the tense atmosphere of the current environment, many people were still paying attention and analyzing. Silver-winged sky god, diamond, fire spirit, white tiger king, these four were rumored to have transcendent abilities. Perhaps one day they could be revered as deities. Chu Feng closed these reports, feeling a bit worried. He didn't know what the future would hold, and he needed to prepare. The yellow bull was unhappy that he had closed the reports, indicating that he should open them again. The reports with audio and video were very appealing to it. Chu Feng threw the communicator to it and walked out of the house alone. After walking along the street for a while, he arrived at a large courtyard. This was the home of Zhao Senyi, also a cold weapon workshop. Today, this ancient craft is almost lost, but Zhao Senyi's family has been passing it down from generation to generation. The Zhao family also keeps up with the times, using the alloy materials of this era to create knives and other tools that are famous far and wide, and much loved by people in this field. The folding crossbow that Chu Feng took to the snow area was a gift from Zhao Senyi. Little Chu, when did you come back? Seeing him, Zhao Senyi smiled. He was now in his 60s, but still very robust. His hair was snow-white but thick and sturdy, standing upright. It was easy to tell that this tall old man was very tough. I came back late last night, had a good sleep, and came to see you after I woke up, Chu Feng said with a smile. You're quite the sweet talker. What have you set your sights on this time? Zhao Senyi asked with a smile. Senyi, I'd like you to help me sharpen some crossbow arrows, Chu Feng stated his purpose. Given the changes happening everywhere, he felt uneasy and wanted to be prepared. He didn't expect to get firearms, which were controlled and impossible to purchase, but some cold weapons could be legally sold in this era. After a simple exchange, Chu Feng stated what he wanted and then said goodbye. He heard from Zhao Senyi that many people had recently come to buy various alloy knives and other tools, and the demand exceeded supply. But what he wanted would definitely be made first. When he returned home, Chu Feng was a bit puzzled. From a distance, he could hear the yellow bull mooing continuously. Soon, he discovered the problem. The yellow bull was fiddling with the communicator, seeming very happy and engaged. Wait a minute, what did he see? As Chu Feng approached, he was taken aback. The yellow bull had opened the contact list and seemed to be communicating with some people. Chu Feng felt dizzy and lines of frustration appeared on his forehead, especially when he saw the names. He felt like vomiting blood. It seemed that the contact list included names like Lin Nuai. Bull Demon King, I'll fight you. Chu Feng yelled. Moo! With a low roar, the yellow ox surprisingly moved with agility, devoid of the usual clumsiness associated with ordinary bovines, and easily dodged. Ox Demon King, do you know what you're doing? Chu Feng ground his teeth, his face darkened, and he charged forward again. However, this time his target was the communicator. He needed to retrieve it first to see who the yellow ox had been talking to, so he could explain the situation later. Otherwise, what would others think? After an inexplicable call, all they heard from his end were constant mooing sounds. This image, just thinking about it, made Chu Feng feel like spitting blood. He wished he could kill this yellow ox for causing such embarrassment. Even if he tried to explain, what could he say, and who would believe him? Chu Feng felt a headache coming on. Do they expect him to tell others that a golden calf had been using his communicator to talk to them? Would he believe it if he were them? The more he thought about it, the darker the situation seemed. The yellow ox was uncooperative and continued to dodge. Moreover, it stood on its hind legs, holding the communicator with its front hooves, and circled around the yard with him, dodging left and right. Give it to me! Chu Feng shouted. The yellow ox was more nimble than a human, like a golden monkey, darting and jumping, circling the stone table, and matching wits with him. It held onto the communicator and refused to let go, occasionally mooing at the device. Chu Feng's face almost turned green. Was this creature still talking to someone? Ox Demon King, I'm going to kill you! He yelled, nearly fainting from anger. This detestable ox was incorrigible, still causing trouble even now. The yellow ox showed disdain, with a look of contempt. You've done enough damage, and you dare to provoke me? Unable to catch up with it, Chu Feng picked up miscellaneous objects in the yard and threw them at it to distract it. This was absolute torture for him. Every second the yellow ox held onto the communicator, he felt a burning sensation on his face. Eventually, the yellow ox stopped and placed the communicator on the stone table. At this point, Chu Feng's forehead darkened, his face full of frustration. He was truly at his wit's end. Clearly, the yellow ox was very curious about the communicator and seemed to love it. Even after putting it down, it kept poking at it with its flexible hooves, which emitted a faint golden glow. Chu Feng glared at it, feeling somewhat powerless as he sat down. He looked at the communicator, then at the yellow ox. How was he going to explain all this? He felt overwhelmed. He sighed softly, picked up the communicator, and decided to just tell the truth. Remember, when I'm talking later, you need to moo a few times to back me up, Chu Feng instructed. The yellow ox nodded guiltily, seeming ready to cooperate. But when Chu Feng looked at the communicator, his face froze. Where were the call records? They were gone. He was completely dumbfounded. Where did they go? Chu Feng suddenly remembered that the yellow ox had been poking at the device. Had it erased everything? Yellow ox, ox demon king, look at the mess you've made. Ah 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 ah. Chu Feng yelled. Just a moment ago, he was thinking about how to remedy the situation, but now he realized he didn't need to. Who have you been talking to? He shouted, recalling that he had briefly seen Lin Nuayi's name. This was the last person he wanted to deal with. Who else was there? The yellow ox shook its head, looking innocently dumbfounded, as if to say it didn't know either. How did you access the contacts? Chu Feng was somewhat frantic. However, when he touched the detestable golden hooves, he felt their warmth and suddenly understood. You're still laughing, wait till the day I contact a chef and have a feast while you're asleep. Chu Feng threatened angrily. At this moment, the communicator flickered. It was Zhou Quan trying to reach him. When he answered, Zhou Quan's loud voice immediately came through, yelling, Ox Demon King, you naughty calf, you've really become a nuisance, daring to harass me continuously. It's me, Chu Feng responded. Ah, thank heavens, it's finally back in your hands. That ox of yours has become a spirit. It was really harassing me just now, calling again and again after I hung up, mooing non-stop. After ending the call, Chu Feng's face stiffened. He could imagine what this stupid ox had done. Who else had it been harassing? Zhou Quan was okay, since he had seen the ox before and didn't need an explanation. The pleasant ringtone sounded again. The communicator was ringing again. Chu Feng picked it up and saw it was his university classmate, Yi Xian. Chu Feng, are you okay? Yi Xian asked. I'm fine, listen to me, it wasn't me just now. Chu Feng was talking and gesturing to the yellow ox to cooperate. However, the damn ox didn't move at all. It just stared at him, completely calm, not making a sound no matter how he gestured. I understand, I get it. You just broke up with Lin Nuayi, you're not in a good mood, but drinking too much is bad for you. Drink less, if you're okay, I'll hang up now. Yi Xian ended the call. What drink? Chu Feng listened to the busy signal at the other end, feeling frustrated and helpless. He just couldn't explain himself. Stupid ox, come here, didn't we agree? You were supposed to back me up. Chu Feng glared at it. The communicator rang again. It was still a university classmate, Su Lingxi, a very pretty girl. Chu Feng suddenly understood. After the yellow ox had finished harassing Zhou Quan, it probably opened his classmate's contacts. Su Lingxi, listen to me, he held onto one of the golden horns of the yellow ox, determined to make it compensate for its actions. He also planned to turn on the video call. However, Su Lingxi didn't need his further explanation. She simply laughed and said, Are you trying to tell me that you have a cow beside you and it did everything? And then you're going to take a picture and send it to me? Alright, I believe you. But this isn't like you, Chu Feng. Aren't you usually very carefree? Just break up with Lin Nui and move on. Is there a need to drown your sorrows in alcohol? By the way, things have been uneasy everywhere recently. Drink less alcohol, take more care of your health, and protect yourself. Alright, I won't say any more, I have some important matters to deal with. Goodbye. Chu Feng was left in a daze. The call had already ended. This is Su Lingxi's style. She's incredibly beautiful, perhaps even handsome, and she's very decisive and carefree in everything she does. After a long while, Chu Feng stared at the yellow cow and said, Damn cow, you've ruined me. The yellow cow looked innocent, implying that it was ready to make amends, but unfortunately, it wasn't given the chance. Chu Feng waited for a long time, and finally, no one was looking for him anymore. That should be everyone. He let out a sigh of relief. Beside him, the yellow cow nodded decisively, looking very certain, indicating that there was no more trouble, just these few people. What are you nodding about? There's clearly one more, how should I approach her? Chu Feng was certain that Lin Ni had been called, because he saw it when he came back. That he was silent for a moment, pushed away the yellow cow's head that was approaching, and then prepared to call Lin Ni. The communicator connected, and there was very soothing music from the other end. Chu Feng didn't immediately speak, He didn't want to formally explain to Lin Ni, perhaps, she should understand that he wouldn't be that bored. There was no sound from the other end of the communicator. Lin Ni didn't speak, the two fell into silence, and they could faintly hear each other's breathing. It continued like this for half a minute. Suddenly, the yellow cow raised its head, rushed forward, and let out a loud moo at the communicator, making Chu Feng's ears buzz. Cow Demon King, Chu Feng was completely enraged. He didn't plan to deliberately explain, but he didn't expect this outcome. Earlier, when he asked it to cooperate, it ignored him. Now that he didn't need it, it rushed over and let out such a thunderous roar. Chu Feng clearly heard the sound of a wine glass falling to the ground from the other end of the communicator. Obviously, Lin Ni was also startled. And then the other side directly hung up the communicator. For a long time, Chu Feng was frozen there, motionless, until later he roared, "Damn cow, I'm going to butcher you." The yellow cow looked innocent, implying, "Wasn't it you who told me to cooperate earlier?" The courtyard was filled with shouts and cow roars. It was as chaotic as chickens flying and dogs jumping, unable to calm down. Until the end, Chu Feng was exhausted, ran back to his room to sleep. He didn't care anymore. Let it be. When he woke up, it was dusk. Chu Feng prepared a sumptuous dinner to reward himself. This was his strength. Whenever he encountered something annoying, a big meal would solve it. Earlier, he wanted to chop the cow into pieces, but now that his anger had subsided, he still prepared some grass and fresh fruits for it. In the evening, Chu Feng watched various reports. He was very concerned about the progress of the changes in various places. Suddenly, both the TV and the communicator became unstable. The signal was blurry, which made his heart slightly heavy. He knew that the satellites in space were most likely under attack. In the end, the interference disappeared. The internet was boiling, because some semi-official news came out. The terrifying plants in space were cleaned up once, almost all of them were removed. Chu Feng pondered, was it really clean? As the night deepened, when he saw some other reports, he was a bit worried and didn't think that the task was accomplished because many areas began to change drastically. Someone posted clear photos showing dozens of mountains appearing outside their front door, majestic and towering, soaring into the clouds, as if they appeared out of nowhere, like in a myth. There were also reports, a young man wanted to go to a neighboring town 10 miles away, but ended up driving 100 miles to finally reach it. This time, not only in places like Songshan, Wangu Mountain, and Taihang Mountain, many places also showed inexplicable phenomena, hundreds and thousands of huge mountains, silver waterfalls hanging high. Oh my god, what happened? Why has Wui Mountain become many times larger, and some unknown areas have appeared? Huashan's main peak reaches straight into the sky, emitting a dazzling light. This area has enlarged several times, there are countless steep peaks, and crimson glow is flowing. This was the information from various places on the internet, and there was more. The drastic change seemed to be accomplished in one step, not limited to some special places. All the famous mountains and rivers have changed, the mist is surging, the spiritual energy is surging, fierce birds and strange beasts are looming, becoming extremely dangerous. Earthquakes, power outages, communication failures, building collapses, etc., are happening along with it. The situation is extremely serious. In the middle of the night, Chu Feng sat quietly in his room alone. He knew that what was supposed to come would eventually come. The most intense change had arrived. Thud, the door sounded, and the yellow cow mooed. Chu Feng opened the door, the golden calf signaled him to follow, and they went to the courtyard together. Then, the yellow cow sat with its two hind legs crossed, looking up at the starry sky, and began that special breathing method, prompting him to follow along. Chu Feng was surprised. The yellow cow was urging him that he calm down, followed that strange rhythm of breathing, and felt the vigorous life energy all over the sky. The moonlight was soft, pale and hazy, as if being guided. It shone on him, getting thicker and thicker, until in the end it formed a hazy white light, pure and holy. In addition, the stars in the sky were also shedding their essence, turning into countless small rivers, slowly flowing down. Chu Feng remained motionless, enveloped in the essence. Everything was hazy. The moonlight was hazy, and the stars twinkled dimly, like a thick fog that enveloped Chu Feng. From a distance, a cloud of white mist was simmering around him. This was a very comfortable feeling. Chu Feng was practicing a special breathing technique, his chest and abdomen rising and falling, and a faint fragrance wafting from his mouth and nose. Historical records mention that when some old Taoists or high monks enter a state of deep meditation, their bodies do not decay, and a pleasant fragrance fills the room. It's a strange phenomenon. Some say it's because they have spent years researching elixirs, and their bodies have been long immersed in them. Others have studied and believe that every person would naturally emit a fragrance like orchids or musk, but due to the pollution of the world, only a few can emit this original scent. Now, a white mist was swirling around Chu Feng's mouth and nose, a light fragrance pervading the air. He could even taste the sweet scent in his saliva, which was very soothing. This was a peculiar breathing technique, performed according to a specific rhythm. Chu Feng felt his body growing lighter, as if he were about to lift off the ground. This breathing rhythm was making his life signs stronger, showing a robust vitality. It wasn't long before the ox opened its eyes. It raised one forelimb to the sky and the other to the ground, mooing a few times before it ended its breathing technique. As the stars showered down their light, Chu Feng also stopped. Although it was not a long time, he had a vague revelation that his body had reached a saturation point in vitality and continuing would be futile. Crack! Suddenly, Chu Feng heard the courtyard wall crack, the ground slightly shook. It wasn't severe, but he could detect it immediately. An earthquake? Then, he heard cries of alarm, and the town was no longer calm. Suddenly, the street lights went out one after another, and the houses also dimmed. The power was out. At the same time, Chu Feng activated his communicator, but the signal was fuzzy and eventually disconnected. Moo! The ox let out a low moo, its eyes shining. It raised its head to look towards the Taihang Mountains, where purple mists were blooming, and silver light was flowing. In the distance, a rumbling sound could be heard. The drastic change had begun again. Even from far away, one could feel the oppressive, majestic aura sweeping over. The mountains have multiplied. Chu Feng was astonished. Looking into the distance, more mountains had appeared in the Taihang range. Some were tens of thousands of feet high, surpassing their previous height. Was this the true face of the Taihang Mountains? The town was in a panic, filled with people's screams, because the ground was stretching, some streets had broken apart, and some houses were starting to crack, showing terrifying gaps. If this continued, they would collapse. The only consolation was that this change was not rapid. This night was destined to be restless. Various fearful screams and the cries of women and children echoed under the night sky, creating chaos. Boom, a building collapsed. Mom, I'm scared. Woo! Grandma, what's happening? I'm really scared. Some children were crying out of fear. That night, Qingyang town was in chaos. It was a disaster like never before. Chu Feng ran out to help people. To his slight relief, there were not many casualties. Most people had managed to run out of their houses in time. When morning came, Qingyang town had changed drastically. A quarter of the houses had collapsed, most of which were in the northern part of the town. It looked as if they had been torn apart, with the broken buildings far apart from each other. The houses in the east, south, and west of the town were better off, only partially damaged with cracks, but they had not collapsed. Water and electricity were completely cut off, greatly affected by the ground fissures. 3 people died, and more than a dozen were injured. Relatively speaking, they should be thankful. The ground fissure happened very slowly, giving people enough time to escape. Only a few people who were sleeping too deeply did not leave their houses, leading to tragedy, but this was enough to cause panic. Nothing like this had ever happened before, especially since the future was unknown, and the environment was changing, shrouded in a fog of uncertainty. People are always afraid of the unknown. Because they don't understand, don't know, it feels even more terrifying. Now was such a time, a period of mystery. Various anomalies were appearing everywhere, accompanied by disasters. Who could say what kind of era was coming? Will it be prosperous, or terrifying? People were at a loss. Qingyang town was shrouded in gloom, cries, anxious whispers. People were dispirited, fearful, unable to see the future, and now, with water, electricity, and communication all cut off, they had lost contact with the outside world. Could they expect rescue? People didn't know what was happening outside, whether it was the same, or more severe. Don't be afraid, only a small part of the houses have collapsed. The rest are enough for us to live in. Power outage is not scary. We have a generator in our town, we can use it soon. As for water, that's even less of a concern. A few ancient wells are enough for us. Zhao San, the elder, was speaking. He was brought by Chu Feng to calm the people. Because Zhao San was respected in the town, he had inherited craftsmanship, a unique cold weapon workshop, and his open-minded, tough personality, all of which made him highly respected. Chu Feng returned home, located at the easternmost part of Qingyang town. The damage was minimal, only a few large cracks had opened in the courtyard wall, but it didn't affect much. The ox was gazing towards the east, a faint golden light beaming in its eyes. It seemed excited, as if waiting for something. What are you waiting for? Chu Feng asked. The ox didn't answer, remaining quiet for several days. This place was cut off from the outside world, completely losing contact. Some people tried driving towards the county town, but many asphalt roads had broken apart. Long stretches had turned into dirt roads. After driving for more than 100 miles, they still couldn't see any towns. This filled people with trepidation, no longer daring to continue recklessly, fearing they would run out of fuel and be unable to return. You should know, under normal circumstances, the county town is only a few miles away from here. It's not far from Qingyang town at all, but now everything has completely changed. Moreover, there are mysterious mountains along the way. Some mountains are dark, giving off a sense of oppression, while some are lush with vegetation, echoing with the cries of monkeys and roars of tigers, which is quite startling. If it were not for the familiar landscape still present in this area, people would really suspect that they had arrived in another world. Qingyang town seemed to be cut off from the world. People were pessimistic. Even though the town's generator was running, the light of the night couldn't dispel the fear of the unknown fate. In the past few days, Chu Feng remained calm and didn't panic. He was quietly observing everything. His parents were in Shantian, a huge city known as the center of the north, with the best protective measures in place, so he wasn't too worried. For the past few days, he had been following a routine, practicing an odd breathing method every day. The pace was neither fast nor slow, but he could clearly feel the changes in himself. He had tried to lift the heavy stone table in the courtyard, which was impossible in the past. Even with his superior physique, he could only lift it half a foot high. Chu Feng was secretly surprised. The effect was too obvious, once in the morning and once in the evening. Although the duration was not long, the unique rhythm of breathing seemed to be gathering medicine, nourishing the body, and enhancing the vitality of the flesh. In his spare time, Chu Feng was out and about, observing the changes in the mountains and terrain. Some places were stretched, some places remained unchanged. He walked through all the familiar areas nearby and found that the overall area had increased significantly. The distances between neighboring mountains and lakes had increased by more than tenfold, and other terrains were roughly the same. Chu Feng was stunned for a moment. The original Shantian, the first city in the north, was only over 200 miles away from here. But according to the current speculation, wasn't it already 2,000 miles away? If he wanted to see his parents, it would be difficult now. 6 days later, the communicator suddenly had a signal. Chu Feng contacted his parents as soon as possible. Both parties reported safety. They could clearly feel the worry of the two elders. They all wanted him to go to Shantian City, because it should be considered the safest place, with all kinds of defensive measures in place and various contingency plans. 6 dynasties had been built there, perhaps for a reason. Even with this drastic change, the entire city was safe and sound. The buildings there were not in the stretch zone and were intact. This made Chu Feng more at ease. He comforted them and said he would go there later, asking them to be patient and wait. Chu Feng, are you okay? Oh my god, there's a storm here. The county town is divided into two, and right next to the city, there are two prehistoric giant mountains piercing into the cloud layer, boundlessly large. Zhou Quan called him, shouting on the other side, emotionally saying, "Guess what I saw? A toad, damn it, as big as a stone roller, and it's eating an elephant." Zhou Fatso was incoherent, shouting on the other side. Chu Feng finally understood that next to the county town, those two mysterious giant mountains were home to all sorts of unknown creatures. Although they hadn't come down the mountains yet, one could clearly capture the shadows of the beasts with a telescope. Zhou Quan had seen a toad as big as a stone roller, hunting various fierce beasts, and even once knocked down an elephant and gnawed at it. After ending the call, Chu Feng fell into deep thought. If those ferocious birds and beasts all came out, wouldn't the world be in chaos? He hoped they couldn't get out of the mountains. Then, his communicator kept ringing. They were all familiar friends and classmates, contacting each other, understanding the current situation, and finally wishing each other to be careful and take care. The world was about to be in chaos. This was Chu Feng's first feeling. If this continued, something big would definitely happen. It was bound to get out of control. Afterward, he quickly went online to read various reports, to understand in detail, because who could guarantee that the signal of this communicator would always be clear? It might be cut off at any time. The whole world had undergone a drastic change. Many people were in fear, many people were crying. This was not the world they were familiar with anymore. Peace could never return. People sensed that a storm was coming. There was a large-scale collapse of houses. Although the ground split very slowly when it happened, giving enough time to escape, there were still a small number of people who lost their lives. People saw that the distance between two places had increased, generally about 10 times, which meant that the area of the entire world had increased by more than 100 times. Some people were crying, thinking that the Earth was connected to other terrifying worlds. Others said that this was the true face of the Earth. In the past, a vast primordial land was hidden, and only now it had appeared. For a time, theories such as folding space were being deeply researched by all parties. Everywhere was restless. Photos of some strange scenes were reported, especially famous mountains and rivers were showing auspicious signs. There were divine trees blooming, holy springs gushing, and some people were even fighting over them, as if they had planned to appear there beforehand, which surprised and puzzled people. During these days, the yellow cow was very quiet, standing in the courtyard staring at the void as if it was paying attention to something. However, there was a burning, excited, and agitated look in its eyes. It was lying low, waiting. On this clear morning, as the red sun just leapt over the Taihang Mountains, the yellow cow suddenly couldn't control itself. It couldn't help but roar and beckon Chu Feng to follow, and it rushed out of the yard directly. This was the easternmost part of Qingyang town. Outside the courtyard was an expansive fruit orchard, offering an abundant tranquility. It also provided a distant view of the Taihang mountain range, presenting a unique landscape. A golden bull plunged into the orchard, its hooves wide apart as it charged forward. The bull, resembling a sculpture made of gold, emitted a radiant glow and looked rather mystical. Chasing after the bull, Chu Feng exerted his utmost energy, but could only manage to trail behind. This 1-meter-tall calf possessed extraordinary stamina and speed, which was startling. Ordinary bulls were generally perceived as clumsy and slow. However, these attributes were completely alien to this golden bull. The bull made its way through the vast fruit forest, light and swift, akin to flying over the grass. It continued until it reached an open area, leaving the fruit orchard behind. A low hill, not very high, appeared ahead. On this morning as the sun was rising, wisps of white mist rose from the hill. Chu Feng knew that this hill hadn't been there before. It had abruptly appeared a few days ago during an anomaly. Elsewhere, the emergent mountains were grand and majestic, but this one was clearly different. It was only 200 to 300 meters high, which could be considered very low. Over the past few days, the golden bull had been fixated on it. From start to finish, it had been gazing in this direction, paying close attention. It was only today that it began to act. Chu Feng was surprised. Was this the golden bull's target? Moo! The golden bull lowed, its sound deep and resonant like thunder. It expressed its excitement and joy. After lying dormant for a few days, it had finally started to act. There were no exotic plants or ancient trees on the low hill, nor any signs of ferocious birds or strange beasts. It was quite ordinary, except for the wisps of white fog rising in the early morning, which made it somewhat different. The golden bull stood unmoving, its gaze intense and full of desire, quietly waiting. Although Chu Feng was curious, he did not ask. He stood quietly next to the golden bull, waiting for the mysterious moment to arrive. Whether it was an illusion or not, the sun rising over the Taihang Mountains was exceptionally red. The morning glow warmed the body and brought an indescribable comfort. At the same time, Chu Feng noticed that the entire world seemed to be filled with more vitality. Suddenly, the morning glow burst forth, instantly sanctifying the land. At the same time, Chu Feng was surprised to find that the distant mountains, such as those deep in the Taihang mountain range, were overflowing with colorful lights. There is a rich vitality suddenly filling the land. Chu Feng revealed a shocked expression. It was emanating from those primordial mountains, spreading throughout the world. Being in the midst of it, one felt their pores open up, as if they were being baptized. The golden bull remained still, paying no attention to these changes. It continued to stare at the low hill. Suddenly, the low hill shook, spewing light and fog, becoming very mysterious. Moo! The golden bull let out an excited call. Disregarding everything, it charged up the low hill, approaching the area where the morning light and white fog were spewing. There was a cave there, previously concealed by vines, but now it could not be hidden. With a whoosh, the golden bull rushed in, unable to hide its excitement. Chu Feng followed behind it. The cave was deep, leading inward. The path was full of axe marks. This stone path had been artificially excavated, its age unknown. It was not a natural cave. Inside the cave, clouds and mists swirled, illuminated by the morning light, giving a very unreal feeling. It was somewhat hazy. This was just a cave, so why was it so mysterious along the way? In this environment, Chu Feng found that his body's vitality was increasing. There was a strange substance here, nourishing his flesh. What was it? Suddenly, he saw it clearly. A small silver snake was attached to the rock wall, but the golden bull rushed over and swallowed it in one gulp. Was it carnivorous? No. Chu Feng suddenly realized that it might not be an ordinary snake. It was emitting a fragrance, and when the golden bull bit into it, it turned into a cloud of white mist and entered its nostrils. It wasn't a snake. After swallowing one, the golden bull charged straight towards the end of the stone cave. On this path, the light was overflowing and it was not dark at all. There was no need to worry about bumping into the stone wall. Chu Feng followed closely behind the golden bull. He felt that they had run several miles, which was a bit unusual, definitely exceeding the limit of the low hill's belly. You should know that this was a straight path, without any twists and turns, and no ups and downs. Folding space. Chu Feng thought of these words for the first time. He had encountered it and experienced it firsthand. The road was long, and they saw several more silver snakes. Even Chu Feng caught two and swallowed them. He felt as if he was soaring in the sky, light and floating. Was this a wisp of white gas? Chu Feng was surprised. He was certain that this was a special substance that could enhance a person's vitality. It was absolutely priceless. Finally, at the end of the road, it was foggy. There was a hazy light blocking something, but it was unclear what it was. With a moo, the golden bull decisively stepped forward, and Chu Feng followed. The next moment, the golden bull was shocked, and Chu Feng was dumbfounded, finding it hard to believe. It felt very unreal. At the end of the road, the world suddenly fell silent, without a sound. What was most incomprehensible was that there was a huge star in front of them, vast and slowly rotating. It was too sudden. Perhaps it could also be said that Chu Feng and the golden bull's arrival was abrupt. Suddenly seeing this scene. Where am I? In the starry sky, there was an enormous planet. Not too far away, its magnificence was palpable. Huang Niu was shocked, while Chu Feng was petrified. It was completely illogical. They had passed through a stone cave and ended up in such a place. Gravity seemed to have ceased to exist. They didn't feel it. If we get a bit closer, can we reach that planet? Chu Feng mumbled as if he was sleep-talking. It was an ancient planet, with a sense of vicissitudes, carrying the breath of endless years. It was silent and slowly rotating. Thick white mist emanated from there, rushing towards them and spreading along the stone cave. Something is coming. Chu Feng exclaimed. On that enormous planet, besides the white mist, there were objects rushing towards them, towards the cave. Silver snakes. He saw them. They were strange substances, shaped like snakes, coming along with the mist. Huang Niu opened his mouth wide and started swallowing. Seeing this, Chu Feng did not hesitate either. He also began to catch the silver snakes, knowing that they were not snakes but a rare, mysterious substance. Soon after, he saw chunks of the same substance. They all had a pleasant fragrance when swallowed. Why was there a planet? Were they standing in the starry sky? Chu Feng didn't care anymore. He and Huang Niu continued to catch the strange substances, until in the end, their stomachs were so swollen that they couldn't bear it anymore. They felt as if their stomachs were about to burst. Reluctantly, they embarked on the journey back. When they came out of the stone cave and entered the outside world, Chu Feng felt as if he had been in another world. Where had he been just now? Suddenly, the earth started shaking, the low hill was trembling and began to crack. Huang Niu let out a loud roar, kicked its hooves, and ran wildly towards the foot of the mountain. Chu Feng was so full that he could barely run. He grabbed Huang Niu's 2 golden horns and sat on its back. Huang Niu glared back in anger, but there was no time to hesitate. After a few bumps, it failed to throw Chu Feng off and had to rush down the mountain. When they had distanced themselves from there, the low hill slowly disintegrated. In the end, with a loud bang, it shattered into dust, creating a cloud of smoke in the sky. However, during this process, the white mist rolled and surged like a river into the sky, too thick to disperse. After an unknown amount of time, it finally dissipated in all directions, merging into the entire world. Huang Niu had forgotten about settling accounts with Chu Feng. It shrank its neck and waited for a long time. Only when the smoke and clouds there had cleared did it cautiously approach. Chu Feng also came closer. Only soil and rocks were left here. It had completely collapsed. As for the stone cave, the so-called folded space, it could no longer be found. How could there be such a place, connected to a planet? Chu Feng was full of questions. Huang Niu didn't answer. After returning to the yard, it immediately started practicing a special breathing method, which lasted for a long time. This time, Chu Feng did the same. He clearly felt different. His vitality was extraordinarily vigorous. During this process, he was sweating all over, and he felt dizzy and heavy. He didn't know how much time had passed before he woke up. After a slight feeling, he found his heartbeat was particularly strong, thumping like a drum. When I carefully sensed it, I could actually hear the sound of my organs like drumming. Chu Feng was dumbfounded. Then, he found that his vision seemed to have improved a lot. A mountain cat on a distant mountain was clearly visible. This was impossible in the past. Chu Feng was startled. He felt that he was stinking all over because he had sweated too much. He was sticky and dirty. At the same time, he felt a strong sense of hunger, as if he could eat a whole cow. He stared at Huang Niu immediately. This guy had also woken up and was staring at him with green eyes, even showing his teeth, as if he wanted to eat him. Chu Feng quickly took a bath and then put a lot of food on the table and started eating like a beast. On the other side, Huang Niu did the same. It ate all the grass and fruits, and finally came to snatch Chu Feng's food, including the meat. For some reason, Chu Feng felt very hungry and could never be satisfied. This meal was equivalent to 10 meals in the past, but he still felt an alarming sense of hunger. But Chu Feng dared not eat anymore. He was afraid of breaking his stomach and could only watch Huang Niu devour everything. "I'm so hungry." He was somewhat scared and went straight out to find an old doctor in the town, fearing that there might be unpredictable major problems with his body. "Why are you so abnormal?" The old Dr. Wang, with white temples and kind eyes, was now startled and looked at Chu Feng with a furrowed brow. Chu Feng was scared and asked, "Do I have a big problem?" "No, you are much healthier than ordinary people. Some of your vital signs are 10 times that of normal people," Dr. Wang said. He had performed a full examination of Chu Feng using various diagnostic tools. Chu Feng was stunned. It turned out to be such a result. "But, I'm very hungry." Chu Feng explained his problem. "Do you feel bloated now?" Dr. Wang asked. "No. Your digestion and absorption capacity is also 10 times that of normal people. Food is converted into the substances you need in the shortest time. If you're hungry, you can eat. There should be no problem." Although Dr. Wang had never seen such a patient, he was very bold and gave such advice. "Please keep this secret from me." Before leaving, Chu Feng repeatedly asked for confidentiality. He didn't want this to leak out. Dr. Wang solemnly nodded and told Chu Feng that he could come over anytime if there were problems. In fact, he was very interested and wanted to follow up and see what Chu Feng would turn into. When Chu Feng came back, he started eating without restraint. While eating, he also logged into his communicator and checked various reports. Then, to his surprise, he found that in some places, foggy scenes had occurred, and several mountains had collapsed, with energy surging like a sea. Doesn't that mean it was similar to what happened at the low hill? It was just unknown whether anyone had mistakenly entered the folded space. "Tell me, is this one of the opportunities you were waiting for when you came to our world?" Chu Feng asked. Huang Niu first nodded, then shook its head. It took Chu Feng some effort to understand that for Huang Niu, this was not an important event, just a good opportunity. Chu Feng was quite surprised. His current vital signs had exceeded normal people by 10 times, and it was all caused by this event. Moreover, this change was still slowly taking place. Finally, Chu Feng was full. He felt immensely satisfied, his body warm and cozy. He lay back in his chair, not wanting to move an inch. He felt comfortable in both body and mind. The feeling of hunger he had experienced not long ago had been so terrifying. After escaping that state, he was filled with a sense of happiness. The table was covered with empty plates, all cleaned out. Chu Feng was a bit stunned, wondering how much he had actually eaten. Had he turned into a real glutton? Not far away, the yellow ox lay with its belly bulging, fast asleep. A wave of sleepiness hit Chu Feng, and he couldn't hold back anymore. He returned to his room and fell asleep. This sleep was particularly sweet, and he didn't wake up until the sun was high the next day. His stomach rumbled with hunger again, waking him up. Chu Feng was shocked. Was he going to spend all day eating and sleeping, like a pig? The yellow ox had woken up long ago. It had rummaged everywhere and cleaned out the fruits in the refrigerator. Still not satisfied, it came to Chu Feng for more. What's the rush? I'll stew some beef for you later. Chu Feng said irritably, pulling out a large piece of meat from the freezer and heading into the kitchen. The yellow ox's eyes widened, and it became agitated. Its two golden horns started to glow, and it snorted white smoke from its nostrils, as if ready to fight. Go away, stop causing trouble. This is pork. Chu Feng said, feeling a bit guilty. In the end, the yellow ox ate a large amount of pork chops and found them quite tasty. Humming in satisfaction. As for Chu Feng, he decisively cooked a pot of beef. He earnestly told the yellow ox that it was mutton, which had a stronger taste and wasn't suitable for it to eat. The yellow ox looked skeptical, occasionally glancing at the pot. It opened its mouth a few times, not sure if it wanted to taste the meat or say something. Anyway, it didn't touch the pot in the end. This damn ox, its nose is too good. It will be troublesome if I want to eat beef in the future, Chu Feng thought to himself guiltily. At the same time, he grumbled, it's just an ox, and it likes to eat meat. What comforted him slightly was that his appetite had decreased a lot, not as frightening as yesterday. When he came to the courtyard, he grabbed the heavy stone table with one hand and easily lifted it above his head. It was too easy. Chu Feng wanted to test his strength. He set his sights on a landscape stone in the courtyard. This stone was not light, having taken several people a great deal of effort to move it in. It weighed around 600 to 700 jin. The stone was not small and difficult to handle, but Chu Feng still firmly grasped it. Then, with a strong upward lift, the brown stone was suddenly lifted off the ground. Finally, he let it drop to the ground with a thud, causing a slight tremor in the ground. Chu Feng was lost in thought. His arm strength was astonishingly great. Being able to lift such a heavy stone was truly shocking. If anyone saw this, they would probably be scared on the spot. More than 10 times the strength of an ordinary person, he murmured. Next, Chu Feng took out a timer and went outside the courtyard. He was ready to test his speed. When he dashed out with a whoosh, he felt the wind whistling in his ears, and the trees on both sides of his body were quickly retreating. 100 meters in 3 seconds? Chu Feng was dumbfounded. His speed was not 10 times that of an average person, but it was still frightening. It far surpassed the recorded human speed limit, making him feel unreal. He was stunned for a long time. After that, he tried various things, such as vision, resistance to blows, nerve reaction, hearing, etc. Of course, these were all roughly conducted by himself and were not very standard. All these values increased significantly, ranging from several times to 10 times. Chu Feng was both shocked and delighted. His body had a slight luster, as if he had undergone a metamorphosis, and there was a faint fragrance about him. This was somewhat like the old Taoist priests and high monks recorded in history, whose bodies became transparent and fragrant in their later years. After they passed away, their bodies did not decay, which is still a mystery. For the next 2 days, Chu Feng stayed at home, silently experiencing the changes in his body, and practicing a special breathing method in the morning and evening. He found that his appetite had returned to normal, and the changes in his body had also stabilized. During these 2 days, the yellow ox was very lazy, wishing to sleep all day. However, as time went on, it gradually returned to normal and began to fiddle with Chu Feng's communicator again. Seeing this, Chu Feng frowned. He was still upset about the last incident. It was so embarrassing that no one would believe his explanation. Bull Demon King, I warn you, don't touch my communicator, or I'll get mad at you. Moo! The yellow ox was defiant. I have something to do now and don't have time to mess with you, Chu Feng said. He wanted to go and see Dr. Wang again to check his body. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he looked at the yellow ox, smiling. Actually, it's easy if you want to play with this. I can help you buy one. When the yellow ox heard Chu Feng say this, it was quite happy. But then it showed a wary look, backed up 2 steps, and stared at him with wide eyes. Dead ox, what kind of look is that? What do you mean? Don't try to figure out my generosity with your wolfish, no, oxish heart. Chu Feng looked at it. Moo! The yellow ox was disdainful. Here's the deal. Besides that special breathing method, teach me some other weird tricks, and I'll buy you a brand new communicator, Chu Feng said with a fake smile. The yellow ox cracked a smile, as if to say, showing your true colors, huh? Chu Feng was quite calm and not embarrassed at all. A communicator is a treasure. Master it, and you can understand the big events happening all over the world. Think about it. With that, he pushed the door and left. Over the past 2 days, the air in Qingyang town seemed extraordinarily fresh. Taking a deep breath, Chu Feng felt refreshed and thoughtful. Was this due to the anomaly in the world? In the distance, he could vaguely see that some mountains were emitting various colored mists, which spread between heaven and earth, making this area even fresher. There were many people in front of Dr. Wang's clinic. Chu Feng was the last in line, and it took a long time before it was his turn. So many people are sick? Chu Feng asked. When Dr. Wang saw him, he immediately laughed and invited him into the inner courtyard. Obviously, he didn't want outsiders to know about Chu Feng's special situation, so he took good care of him. You're wrong. These people did have some minor illnesses before, but in the past 2 days, their chronic diseases have gradually disappeared, and their bodies have gotten better and better. Chu Feng was surprised, and after some thought, he showed a look of intrigue. Does it have to do with the changes in the world? He speculated. It should be. Look at those mountains in the distance. The mist they emit seems to contain some special substances that are extremely beneficial to the human body. Dr. Wang nodded. He too was deeply amazed, as he had seen many people with chronic illnesses gradually improving over the past few days. Most of the people who came today did so because they felt better and wanted to confirm it with a checkup. Originally, with the dramatic changes in the world, people were terrified, but now it seems that it's not as bad as we imagined. Dr. Wang sighed. During these days, ordinary people felt energetic and the changes were significant, which brought them immense joy. Chu Feng looked into the distance. In those primeval mountains, there were many fierce birds and beasts. If they broke out, the scene would definitely not be peaceful like it is now. For instance, the toad that Zhou Quan saw, as big as a stone roller, could chase after all kinds of fierce beasts, knock down an elephant, and take it as food. Dr. Wang examined Chu Feng and patiently carried out multiple sets of physical tests. In the end, he was astonished to find that Chu Feng's physique had improved once again. This time, Chu Feng ran 100 meters in only 2.5 seconds, which greatly scared the old man, and his strength was 12 times that of an ordinary person. His hearing, nervous response, vision, etc., were even more astonishing than the last time. It's incredible. Can it continue to improve? Dr. Wang muttered to himself, slightly lost in thought. I guess I've reached the peak at this stage. Because, these past 2 days, I feel that my body has gradually stabilized, and my appetite has returned to normal, so I came for another checkup, Chu Feng honestly informed. Even so, it's like something out of a myth. Dr. Wang struggled to calm his emotions. Suddenly, he sniffed and said, I've been smelling a faint fragrance. Is it coming from you? He was somewhat uncertain, showing a surprised expression. Chu Feng nodded. After Dr. Wang confirmed that it was naturally emitted from Chu Feng's body, his expression froze, almost petrified. He found it hard to believe, and then his face showed a look of shock. How is this possible? He stared at Chu Feng with his mouth agape, unable to speak for a long time. Is there a problem with this? Chu Feng asked. How can there be no problem? If this were in ancient times, it would definitely be a big deal. Some old Taoist priests and high monks, when they lived over 100 years, might emit this kind of fragrance. Plus, with such strength and speed, in ancient times, there was a saying, it's called the sanctification of the flesh. There is such a saying? Chu Feng was taken aback. Yes, the sanctification of the flesh. Dr. Wang replied affirmatively. Chu Feng was stunned. This was indeed astonishing. Some ancient records, although they seem very mysterious, cannot be completely denied. Some are credible. Dr. Wang said that he was proficient in Western medicine, but he was a bona fide practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine. He had a deep understanding of some ancient medical books, even dabbling in some pill prescriptions. Some of these were ancient books of Taoism and Buddhism, so he knew a lot. The limit of the human body should be breakable. Aren't you a living example? Dr. Wang sighed. Some people in ancient times must have been able to do it. For example, Sakya throws an elephant. It sounds very mysterious, but if a person's physical strength is strong enough, perhaps it can really be done. According to him, Buddha was just a human, but because of his exceptional physical strength, he was able to throw an elephant. Sakya throws an elephant. Taoist moves mountains. These are all manifestations of the sanctification of the flesh. These people, even after their bodies die, do not decay, and emit a fragrant scent. Dr. Wang became more and more excited as he spoke. It was clear that he was very interested in these ancient records, especially seeing Chu Feng as a living example. He couldn't calm down at all. You definitely can't throw an elephant now, but it makes me understand that after the human body breaks its limits, there is such a possibility. Dr. Wang wished he could dissect Chu Feng for a detailed study. Chu Feng quickly got up, bid him farewell, and left as if he were escaping. On the way, Chu Feng thought about a lot of things. As he was about to enter his house, he heard the wind howling in the courtyard, accompanied by thunder. The noise was tremendous. What happened? He was a bit worried. The Bull Demon King hadn't caused any trouble again, had he? As Chu Feng stepped into the yard, he was dumbfounded. He saw the yellow bull standing on its two hind legs, its front hooves moving, it was boxing, the strong wind was stirring, and the sound of thunder was booming, all emanating from its body. Was this a kind of boxing technique? A bull, it knew boxing.